Hi, I'm Kelsey Zeiser. Welcome to What's the Story, a short podcast from Light Reading where we take a step back from the most significant topics in telecom to tell you the latest news, how we got here, what it all means, and what to expect next. Today I'm talking with Light Reading's Tereza Krásová about a recent Ericsson event in London where CTO Erik Ekudden discussed developments in fixed wireless access, private networks, and also AI. We discuss what progress has been made in these areas and whether we share in Ekudden's optimism about the potential for growth in these markets. Hey, Tereza, welcome back to What's the Story? Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Kelsey. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to see you. So you recently went to an Ericsson event in London where the CTO, Erik Ekudden, I hope I'm saying his name right, spoke.
I think you
Well, he
are.
spoke
My
about.
Swedish isn't quite up to scratch.
Yeah, I did. I studied Spanish, so in any other country, I'm doing my best. But anyway, we'll just say the CTO of Ericsson was speaking about fixed wireless access or FWA, private networks, and also AI. And was wondering, just to start, of those topics, was there one that he was particularly bullish about, or seemed most excited to discuss?
Yeah, absolutely. I think bullish is a strong word. I think he was like, the way I describe it is that he kind of was. One of his points was kind of that there's definitely that at different stages of maturity or of that there will be a slightly different timeline in terms of how they impact the industry. So I think in terms of fixed wireless access, one of his points was basically that it's technology where the business opportunity has been underestimated. And based on kind of the data presented at the event, it should go from representing kind of 11% of all fixed broadband subscriptions to 18% over the next 5 years, and that there should be a kind of around a 14% annual growth rate through 2030 in terms of fixed wireless access subscriptions. And he was quite he seemed quite optimistic about the advantages in terms of it's much easier to set up than bringing a maybe like if you don't have bringing basically like a fully fixed connection, as well as the net promoter score, which it seems to be kind of quite positive in that side of things as well. In terms of the other stuff, private networks got mentioned, as you say, um, and that's kind of something that's obviously been talked about a decent amount, I would say, in the past months, years, etc. But it seemed from the data that there's been a certain amount of growth in terms of customer references, or especially in China, also kind of in sort of virtual private networks, which use a slice of the public network to create a virtual private network. Um, and sorry. And also, there's been talk of, and now we're kind of, if we get to the things that seem to be more, maybe even more sort of forward looking, or maybe slightly less mature, maybe it's things like augmented reality. He talked about the kind of potential for, and this was, I think, quite like, I would say, almost speculative in terms of where the technology could go eventually, in terms of things like live translation of conversations and that sort of a thing. But like, if you look at, or like, I would say his point was that if you look at the things like he mentioned the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, which already have kind of hit the market and have hit 2 million shipments, I think. So it's I mean, obviously 2 million. If you look at the kind of how many devices there are in the market, you'll notice, like, or this is much more your area than mine, obviously, but it's still not necessarily something that's going to become maybe ubiquitous very soon. But it seems like there's been a certain amount of traction, and it does mean, well, his point was that it would have kind of large implications for mobile networks because it's kind of something that you use outdoors, and in his view, it would kind of change the requirements on the network, because it would kind of you'd need like much better latency specs, and also
Yeah, I think that's I mean, that was kind of a struggle with the what I think is now defunct, the Humane AI pin, was, getting it to work properly wherever folks were located. And, they had some problems with it heating up and just being slow to deliver information.
yeah,
I haven't tried the Meta Ray-Ban glasses. I think it's interesting. I did see someone wearing
oh
some, and
really?
they looked,
Oh, wow.
I thought they looked pretty cool, and, um, more so like a regular pair of glasses versus what we think of like, years ago with the Google Glass. So I think that'll be an interesting one to watch. It still seems like you said, a bit of a niche market, and, um, but it also seems like there's more acceptance than, like, you know, not to harp on Google Glass too much, but than those that were just, very obviously something unusual to wear on your face. Things
Yeah.
like more like actual glasses and
It's less of
or
a casual look, definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. Although, like, I don't know. I feel like it's probably the European in me, but I'm still like, it's so crazy that you already have something where you just, you wear the glasses and you can kind of record anyone
Mhm,
around you. And I know that there's supposed to be like light that shows you, that indicates
mhm.
that it's being recorded, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it feels a tiny bit scary.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
but it's
don't I
definitely.
don't yeah, it's a people are recording each other plenty with their phones, but for some reason doing it with your glasses seems more like a spy kind of privacy issue.
Literally like something
Uh
out of James Bond, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we'll see where those go. Um,
Yeah.
kind of circling back a little bit to fixed wireless access. Did he expand at all on, any markets or regions where he sees um, FWA growing? Did he talk about regional or urban? It's cool if he didn't. Was just curious if that came up at all.
The short answer is no, no, it didn't. But yeah, it's a good point, because I think it's obviously something that there's massive, or I don't think he expanded on it. He might have mentioned it, but I think, yeah, it's obviously something where the US has seen much more traction, I think, than most of Europe, for sure, where it kind
Mhm.
of seems like we're very much still, yeah, it's much more kind of reliant on, be it copper or optical fiber, for sure. And yeah, it's
Right.
obviously like it's a technology that's made for, it's much more beneficial for, or it's kind of, it's more advantageous in certain types of environments, for sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so that'd be interesting to watch to see what the uptake in Europe, for example, will be. Looking at private networks, I think that's interesting. He brought that up, and like you mentioned, it's been private 5G networks have been discussed for a number of years, and I think the industry was really bullish about it in the beginning, but it seems like it's been a bit slow. Adoption wise, there was a lot of focus on private networks for manufacturing and mining use cases, but I think the manufacturing industry is a tough one to get into because of how ready they are to upgrade some of their equipment. It needs to be uh, tested, secured, reliable,
Yeah.
which I'm sure they're presenting it that way, but I think that the manufacturing industry can sometimes be a bit maybe slow to adopt something new because they of course want to make sure it can work right. So did he touch on any concerns around private networks? Doesn't sound like you did, but just curious, anything else you wanted to add on that topic that he discussed
Uh,
at the event?
yeah, definitely. I think like he definitely acknowledged that. Like for example, he mentioned the kind of device ecosystem and the fact that it needs to be kind of that it kind of on the enterprise side, it's much less mature already than on the consumer side. So yeah, he did mention the kind of things like 5G laptops where they are expecting like growth in annual shipments, for example. But yeah, for sure, I think there was an acknowledgement that with this point with the device ecosystem, it's kind of it needs to improve for kind of to kind of facilitate more businesses to or more enterprises to use private networks. There was you mentioned manufacturing. There was like quite an interesting talk by someone from Jaguar Land Rover who worked with Ericsson to establish private 5G networks at their manufacturing sites, and they seemed quite. They seemed very happy with the technology. They kind of said that they used it at one point to kind of resolve a bottleneck. So you you can probably see some movement, but yeah, obviously it's interesting because like I've been covering telecoms for 2 years now, and you kind of it feels like there's always optimism, but not necessarily. It hasn't so far yielded the the hype has so far not been entirely fulfilled, if I can put it that way. So
Yeah, no,
um,
I think you hit the nail on the head. There's still a lot of runway, but there have been definitely some interesting use cases where private 5G network was installed to accommodate for lack of performance or reliability and Wi-Fi. I think a good example is um, in 2021, Verizon was discussing their private 5G network with the Port of Southampton, which I believe is in the UK, and discussed how, Wi-Fi wasn't as reliable and that it was a bit spotty, and so that having a private network was really beneficial for that port, and that's definitely an important export, having that connectivity. So yeah, I think there's still a lot of use cases to be explored there, but good to hear that he's still optimistic about it.
I mean, I think if you're Ericsson, and this is my opinion, you want to sound optimistic about it. I would imagine you want to you want to be optimistic about it. But yeah, I you do wonder how much of it is actually going to translate in the near term. There was one thing actually when you mentioned kind of different use cases. There was um, Erik Ekudden. He did mention the like use case in Singapore where it's 5G is being used at a hospital with kind of XR, which sounded quite interesting. But it's something that is still seems like one project that hasn't necessarily been scaled to something that's more of a routine deployment. So yeah, I think it's yeah, yeah. He did sound optimistic. Obviously, you can wonder how much of it was what he would say. Sorry,
Yeah,
scratch
how much
that.
how much
Um,
will actually come to fruition outside of those, as you mentioned, kind of a niche use case with the XR in the hospital. Although, it kind of reminds me of the when 5G was first coming out, the promise of robotic surgery, which is scary.
yeah,
We were all
I
like,
I think
please.
everybody's terrified by that. Please
Yeah,
don't let
no,
everyone on me using 5G. Not in
no one
London.
really wants to sign up for that. I just thought it was funny that they were pushing it so hard as, this is a really cool use case. And I mean, who really wants robotic surgery? But anyway, that's
I
neither
mean,
here nor
I
there.
live in London. If I can get reliable coverage, in the city centre, I'd be very happy with that.
Exactly. Yeah, we let's um, take a different look at our realistic expectations here of what people really want. It's just,
Yeah.
going back to, you mentioned like AR, I think the real desire is things like not getting motion sickness when you're using, VR or
Yeah.
technologies like that, having low latency. We want that. We don't want robotic surgery so much.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you wonder sometimes how much is happening that's kind of trying to run before you can walk.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Well, Teresa, as we wrap up, was there anything else that stood out to you from his talk, or?
It's a good question. I think we've really summed it up pretty well. I think he kind of one thing that I sometimes tend to maybe be. I sometimes think I need to check my optimism, but he did sound like he definitely there was, I think, a genuine level of optimism for you know potential growth areas. I would say.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, they're all interesting areas for sure. Um, so Teresa, thanks for going over this with us. And yeah, we'll continue to keep an eye out on the growth rate of some of these things. So thanks again for joining What's the Story?
Thank you, Kelsey.
Thanks so much, Teresa, for taking the time to talk today. And thank you to our wonderful producer, Pierre Landriot, for making this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Light Reading Podcast for more interviews and insights from the team. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.